is Hong Kong, one of the world's leading financial hubs. Today, Hong Kong boasts the world's freest economy for over a decade, with free flow of capital and information, a clean government, and low tax rates and a simple tax regime. An international port like Hong Kong is also diverse and global in its culture and lifestyle, with a multilingual labor market and society, often fluent in both English and Chinese. Safe to say, if Hong Kong had a time machine and could talk, and it decided to go back to its past and talk to its old self, Hong Kong past would definitely tell Hong Kong present, wow, we have come a long way. From a tiny British outpost in the southeastern flank of China to a fledgling trading colony, then wrecked by chaos of the world wars, and finally industrializing and becoming the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of China that we know today.
The story of Hong Kong begins with at least the end of the Opium Wars resulted in decisive British victory, and Hong Kong was ceded to the empire for 99 years. Within these 99 years, Hong Kong went through all sorts of whirlwind change.
Britons have inherited a male fishing village from China, but its jurisdictions transformed Hong Kong into the center of international trade, export becoming the Hong Kong lifeline, and the centrality of the trade in Hong Kong economic life also linked to the developments of the servicing industry to support trade, both internationals and regionals.
For the trade economy allowed Hong Kong to develop itself, over-reliance on the trade made it extremely susceptible to the ensuing historical chaos of the 20th century.
And here also the World War and Chinese nationalism. Well, mainland Europe was fighting each other and the Chinese civil wars have gone into full throttle, and the Hong Kong often found itself sucked into the conflicts of China through the split of the Chinese nationalism as the Communist Party led by the Maoists and the Republicans Kuomintang led by Chiang Kai-shek from each other in Guangdong province right next to Hong Kong.
Even though it was British territory, its distance from Europe kept World War immediate impact on Hong Kong minimal. Be that it may, Hong Kong was not left alone. The global economy suffered a great deal from the war due to inflation and the cost of living increased greatly, while wage remained stagnant. Hong Kong's trade-based economy plummeted as the global economy was put on hold. Nonetheless, it was able to maintain relative stability.
Yes. Luck would turn for the worse in the 1930s, when the Great Depression struck the world, stock market collapsed, and international trade greatly decreased. Just as the Depression was ending, the Japanese invaded Hong Kong, and in 1941, Japan subjects the Hong Kong to martial law and destroyed the territory.
The Chinese Civil War resumed following Japanese surrender in 1945. As Mao Zedong began to take control over the mainland, British Hong Kong prepared itself for the worst. However, Mao stopped right at the front door of the economy, instead deciding to wait patiently for the 99 years lease to end. He did not want to risk provoking the might of the US and its allies. Within this context, the modern development of Hong Kong begins.
So now let's take a few minutes to talk about Hong Kong recovery. Well, after the end of the Pacific War, Britain, primarily concerned in China, were to rebuild its economic interests and above all to secure a position in Hong Kong at the lowest possible cost.
Yeah, and Hong Kong's journey to wealth creation over the previous few decades has been primarily due to its export-led growth policy.
While following the Great Depression, many Latin American countries deliberately put in place protectionist policy to stop competition for the infant industry. This approach is known as import substitution industrialization, or known as ISI. The goal was to become self-sufficient and self-reliant upon developed countries. However, the problem with the ISI was that it was unsustainable in the long run. The domestic producer lacked skill, specialization, and innovative drive as there was no foreign competition or imports. The domestic products were costly to produce and sell and also had a low quality.
Along with the theory of comparative advantage show how country can benefit from trade by giving up self-sufficiency. Country can focus and specialize on what they are better at and import what they lack. The failure of ISI pushed East Asian countries to adopt the export-led development strategy to rebuild their countries post-war.
Yes, Chantai, you're right. Actually, Hong Kong, along with Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan, import foreign technology to build their own domestic industry. Instead of implementing protectionist policy for their infant industry, they utilize comparative advantage and produce domestic goods that could be imported to other countries, namely textile. By importing quality spinner from the West, Hong Kong investors established an enormous number of small and medium-sized businesses, particularly in the textile industry.
You took the word right out of my mouth. Businesses were primarily manufacturing to fulfill the rising needs for inexpensive industrial products in Europe and North America, eventually expanding out into clothing, electronic technology, and plastic. The export increased from 54% to 64% of GDP in the 1960 to 1970, demonstrating their exceptional performance. Hong Kong is on the whole a free port with only a few commercial restrictions. During the 1950s, property rights were maintained. The law was strict and the court were completely fair, and the imperial administration interfered slightly in foreign trade. Furthermore, while the UK were creating a heavily active social welfare system at home, Hong Kong had an essentially free market economic strategy embodied by Mr. John Cowatt, the country financial secretary from 1961 to 1971.
Moreover, do you know that this economic strategy, which emphasized competitiveness and entrepreneurship, actually paved the way for a significantly quicker development of economy? Therefore, what propelled Hong Kong to its current status was large in part due to its export-led strategy and rapid industrializations.
Lanami at Kamasu was Japan's economy in pre-war Japan. In 1937, he published an article where he was coined the term "Wagi's flying pattern of economic growth in Japan." What did he mean by that? Well, let's look at how the Wagi's fly. An inventory painter with one bird in front, while the rest fly to catch up and eventually take over. In a Komatsu model, product, industry, and consequently national economy, developed by using comparative advantage to catch up with each other and then the West. This model became popular in 1980 among economy and eventually the wider public to explain not just Japan development, but also the rest of East Asia and even Southeast Asia. Hong Kong, together with Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan, has joined one of the four Asian tigers during this period. The four Asian tigers grew and developed also flying Geese panther, with Japan in the front.
Janta and Gegnai discussed in the section about its political, Hong Kong began to rapidly industrialize, first in its textile industry, and as the economy progressed, it moved on to newer, more elaborate industries such as chemicals, then steel, then electronics. Akamatsu's models describe the sequence in 4 steps. First, Hong Kong imports textile from a developed country. Second, domestic industry begin to build up and Hong Kong start substituting import with domestic textile, importing spinner. Third, Hong Kong's domestic country produces enough to begin exporting and imports decrease further. Fourth, as Hong Kong develops, it shifts from producing textile to making machinery, as it has lost comparative advantage due to rising labor costs. The textile industry shifts to another country and Hong Kong begins importing textile once more. This model shows that this pattern began in Japan, which was the first Asian country to industrialize textile production. Then it moved to Hong Kong and the other dragons followed to Asian, and now textiles are slowly shifting within Asian and then to other parts of Asia.
So, thank you everyone so much for helping me discuss Hong Kong's road to development. Xian, of course, you and Seng Hian, you really discussed a lot about the chaos that Hong Kong went through during the war, and Gegnai and Chanta, your conversations on export-led growth. Sokmay, you and Vitbol, sorry, Sokmay's not here today. So you and Sokmai really elaborated on Akamatsu's model. I think what I can see and what the viewers can get from all of this is that I think the flying geese model is a really good, it's really important because it shows how export-led growth, comparative advantage, and regional integration really helped East Asia's economic miracles, especially Hong Kong. We're talking about Hong Kong right now. So I'm thinking it's also a good case study for a developing country like Cambodia, don't you think?
Yes, it's great pattern that could probably help Cambodia a lot.
However, I do think that there are some criticisms to this model we really need to consider. Sometimes the industries or the geese in this model, they never really leave a country once they get there. National industries are very important, and with so much competition between developing countries these days, a lot of foreign direct investment are not concentrated in a single country as it used to be. What do you think about that? I would really love your input.
Well, yeah, when it comes to development, countries really have to take into account a lot of factors. Country development, like what East Asian economy did, they had a lot of other geopolitical factors that really have played into that. For a country like Cambodia, they still need to fix a few other things first. Like with Hong Kong, there are some necessary steps to take for our institutions such as government corruption, the rule of law, and also education. Those are some important as well.
But nonetheless, I do think that the flying geese model is a great explanation for the pattern of development across Asia. And you can see this movement still in Cambodia with the textile industry and all that. So, any final remarks? Weekball, I would love to hear from you.
Yes, thank you, Chiu. Personally, Hong Kong economy very most different was study of the market of the free market. And with that being said, I think so how it important it is.
Hmm. Thank you, Weekball, and thank you, everyone.